Hello, this is John Morris Dixon, former editor of Progressive Architecture magazine, and you are listening to USModernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today, it's one of our most interesting Renaissance guests, art collector, model collector, race car driver, softball player, New York-based architect, Ronnette Riley. And later, we'll talk Lustrons with Virginia Faust, and special musical guest Leonardo sings about Lustrons. Finally, we'll spend a few minutes with architect Frank Harmon from his new book, Native Places. And now, despite Bjarke Ingels going, that guy again, every time he leaves a voicemail, here's your host, George Smart.
Hi, folks. Bjarke, please call me back. As we record the show today in mid-April, it's week 5 in the coronavirus crisis. The good news is that social distancing is working. In most states, we are staying well ahead of the capacity to care for victims of COVID-19. Those of us lucky enough to stay home, whether we are working or not, owe a huge debt to the first responders, healthcare staff, and supply chain workers who keep the country going while we all wait things out. It's our toughest challenge as a planet, really. Over the years, what I've learned from modernism is that there's a shared optimism, a joyous and sometimes idealistic hope in the promise of a better future. Modernist architecture relies on us to continue that optimism going forward. It's a wildly passionate desire to make all our tomorrows better than our yesterdays. After World War II, that optimism promised a metamorphosis: air conditioning, color TVs, jet travel, flying cars, handheld communicators, and helpful robots. Well, we didn't get the flying cars.
Right.
But for a long time, we kept that sense of optimism. It may be unrealistic, but I still have it. And I want you to know that Tom and I and all the staff and volunteers of U.S. Modernists will do everything we can to keep that boldly going for you through this crisis.
Yes, we will.
For the average person, architecture really takes a back seat right now to just about everything else. As travel and tours become impossible, and even going to the grocery store can be stressful. But we can all do our part. U.S. Modernists donated 550 pairs of shoe covers to UNC hospitals, and we are encouraging donations to directrelief.org, one of the most respected disaster charities in the world. Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Nichiha.com/USModernist and modernist realtor Angela Roll.
Durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good, and you love feeling this good. Nichiha, Nichiha. Nichiha, Nichiha. Say it with me. Nichiha. Advanced engineering. Nichiha, Nichiha. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nichiha.com/USModernist. Nichiha, Nichiha. Nichiha. That's N. C H I H. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nichiha.
I love doing that spot. And hey, my ASMR CD is available in the lobby. Don't all of you rush out there at one time. Okay, I have been so excited about our next guest ever since I met her in New York earlier this year. She's one of America's most successful women in architecture. She races cars. She collects buildings, well, small ones. And she's just so great to be around. Ronnette Riley graduated from Berkeley's College of Environmental Design and later Harvard's Graduate School of Design. After college, she worked with Philip Johnson for 8 years as project architect on the iconic New York City Lipstick Building, a 453-foot-tall skyscraper located at 885 3rd Avenue. Since 1987, her firm of architects, interior designers, industrial designers, and even historical preservationists have completed projects such as the flagship Apple Store in Soho, Coca-Cola on Fifth Avenue, Restoration Hardware, a children's library in Harlem, and many more. One of her quotes that I just love is, "People don't always remember the building, but they always remember the space." Welcome, Ronnette.
Hello, thank you.
Well, it's so nice to chat with you.
It's wonderful, even remotely.
We just missed the opportunity to talk with you in your very special car driving into New York. Tell us about that car.
Some people have children. I have cars. So it's a Maserati, and I've actually had it on the track. And I can say it does not turn as well as you'd want it, but it does go fast.
You had it on the track?
Yeah.
At home?
She races it.
You have a large circular driveway or what?
The Pocono racetrack.
Oh, my goodness.
And
you're serious.
During the driver's meeting, this guy asked if there was tapping, and I said, "Don't you dare tap my car. You might meet Mr. Smith & Wesson." But
oh, baby.
Man.
Is this Sports Car Club of America, or what kind of races are these that you participate in?
It's a variety of track days. I was part of a group of 59 guys and me that did racing on closed public roads. And it was a brung what you run, or run what you brung. So everyone brought their own cars, and there was a formula for horsepower and weight. And you were on the road by yourself, each one. So that was kind of nice.
This is like Le Mans. Did it go 24 hours?
No.
Okay. Because I'm an expert in all that, having watched Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh, wasn't that fun?
It was a lot of fun.
Now, this is not your first sports car, though.
No. My very first car was a 58 Thunderbird convertible. Ooh. My father liked to fix up cars, so I owned quite a few, or drove quite a few in my youth. So mostly American muscle cars, like the 69 Riviera, cars like that.
When did you switch over to Italian cars?
Well, I did German first, always American, and then I got a BMW convertible, which actually handles very well on the racetrack. It actually lives up to its name, the ultimate driving machine.
Uh-huh.
So I have a 645 convertible BMW, which is really good on the track. And then I just wanted a four-door, and my mom said there were other four-doors, but I said none that have the name Maserati.
Now, you must be a fan of the show Top Gear, which started in the UK and has spread to Amazon now.
Well, in the old days, my dad used to have us work on cars with him, but now I'm more interested in the auctions and guessing how much they're going to go for.
Oh, let's make a deal for car buffs.
Yeah.
Maserati is certainly one of the top marks in the world. Is it up there like with Bugatti and McLaren and in that range?
I think it's the only girl car in the upper end, because the Bugatti, first of all, is $1 million car, and the McLaren is, I have driven a McLaren, I will say. It's wonderful. But no, it's in there with the lower priced Ferraris, and it's just a nice, elegant machine. It's all about the design. I really love the design of cars. I had a fight with a professor in college about what would be a representative that told you were a successful architect. What would make you think you were successful? And I put, when I was a freshman, having a Mercedes 280 SL. And he argued with me, and he said that was a fad and that my taste would change. Well, I have to tell you, I still think that's one of the most beautiful cars that are designed.
And the BMW 645 that was involved in a story about a client of yours, right?
Oh, I know. Was it when I drove up and he said he couldn't afford me?
Yes.
Yeah, I drove to a site and the client standing there, he goes, I can't afford you. And I said, yes, you can, because obviously I've made money for my clients. So.
Good answer. Now, where did you grow up, Ronnette?
I grew up in Northern California in a town called Vallejo, California. It's the town no one's heard of next door to Napa. So
okay.
We had dairy cows, and Napa did not have vineyards until recently, but it's about 35 miles north of San Francisco.
Quiet little town?
Well, it was a kind of a rough town. It was actually, I feel, more dangerous to live there than to live in New York City. In the early 90s, they closed the big shipyard. There was a submarine base there, and that was closed down. It was the first of the California towns to go bankrupt. And so it's had its problems. But from an architectural point of view, it's a fabulous town. It's on the water. It's on the Napa River. It's within driving distance of San Francisco, but more importantly, it has a high-speed ferry from San Francisco to this town. It's rolling hills. It's, the weather is fair. So it's architecturally a great place. Unfortunately, in the 60s, they came in and raised blocks and blocks and blocks of old Victorians and historic buildings in urban renewal. So it was one of those towns that really suffered from bad urban design.
I understand that you were involved somehow wanting to make your church better when you were 12 or 13?
My father was a fireman, ultimately became a fire chief, and my brother, fire captain, uncle, fire captain, my nephew now, fire cadet. But my church burned down in 1968, and the vestry saved a lot of money by hiring a contractor to do the design and build the church. And I was horrified because our old church had been an 1850s Gothic, wood-timbered, traditional-looking church, and what they built could also be used as a garage, I think. It was just horrible. And I was so upset that they thought that they could save money by just having a contractor do it. And, yeah, they saved money, but it's been many years now, and it's still a very unattractive building.
You'd think they would, call you up and say, hey, Ronnette, design us a new church.
Yeah.
But she was 12, right?
Yeah. I was pretty young then.
But I mean now.
Now they don't have the money, but it's a shame. And then I moved to New York and immediately got involved in a controversy because St. Bartholomew's on Park Avenue, they were trying to tear down a portion of it and build a skyscraper. So I was on the committee to save St. Bartholomew's. Rather than build the new building, it was to save the historic.
I take it you won?
Yes.
Now, where in the timeline here was this before or after St. Bartholomew's that you started working with Philip Johnson?
At the same time. I came to New York. I was just coming here for a summer, and then I worked for a few different people. And then when I decided I was going to stay in New York, I applied to Philip's office and was hired.
And what year was that?
1980.
1980. So he was rocking and rolling in the 80s.
Yes, and he was 72 at the time, and I thought, I'm probably the last group of architects that'll work with him. Well, he retired at 98. So.
Yeah, I mean, he was around a long, long time.
And what was great about him is that he's reinvented himself many times. And at one point, I won the T-shirt contest for the softball team by just putting all the names the firm had been with a cross out and the final name at the bottom.
How many names were there?
At that time, there were about 6. And then he went on to have 2 or 3 more. So I think as an architect, you have to be very flexible. And, he was in different partnerships. And at one point, he was on his own. Then he was back into partnership. And he finally, his last incarnation was with Alan Ritchie, and Alan had been working at the office when I was working there and left, and then he and Philip hooked up and were partners for a long time after the Johnson Berge firm dissolved, and it was great because he was very talented as well.
What was it like interviewing with Philip Johnson?
Well, I didn't interview with him. I interviewed with someone else, and he liked my hand lettering, and he said, it looks like you'll fit in. So my advice to any young architects out there is practice your printing. But my first day of work, I had come from the West Coast. Work started about an hour earlier there, and I was there early, and Philip was the only one in the office, so he gave me my orientation tour and walked me around, and I found out later that he doesn't really do that. So I was very fortunate. So I immediately had a connection with him.
That's pretty good luck right there.
Pays to be early sometimes.
Yeah. I've been telling people that for years, but people just ignore me. But here's proof. And then how did you get involved with the lipstick building? Was that fairly soon after you started?
It was a building that hung around. It started when I first joined the firm. I worked on a project down in Maiden Lane, 33 Maiden Lane. But I worked under a guy named Scott Johnson, who has a successful firm out in L.A. now. But Scott had gone to Berkeley and Harvard, and he was a very smart project manager or project architect. He would go in the front office and get a building and come back and give it to somebody on the team to work on. And then he'd go in the front office and get another building to work on. Whereas the other project managers would get a building and then they would micromanage it for the next 3 years. So within a year, our team, with Scott as the head, had 6 or 7 projects we were working on. We were working on Times Square and a project up in Boston, and it was very exciting. And he gave us a lot of leeway because, of course, he couldn't oversee all those projects. And then if we made mistakes, he stood up and took the arrows,
Wow.
If there was a mistake. So it was a great way to learn. We had a long rope, but we also had someone that had our back. So everyone on our team really advanced their capabilities and their career much faster than other people in the office. So I was very fortunate. And then he left. And so no one knew what was going on with the lipstick building because I had been the only person working on it. So I fell into the position of, it had some difficult math because it's before computers, and there were 3 ellipses that are not from the same family. And there was some very complicated mathematics going on with the ellipse. So I was the only one that understood it.
When was that building erected?
It opened in 1986, and it started construction in 1983. But it had been around the office a couple of years because it took them a long time to clear the site.
So this was really maybe just at the very end of hand drawing and before computer-aided design?
It was the first project in the office ever to be done on computer, and I had to drive out to the middle of New Jersey to some scientific center to get them to run the formulas
to load
on
the
the
punch
ellipse.
Cards?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was quite interesting back then because we were designing it in 1981, 82.
Mm-hmm.
It was done very fast. It was built in 19 months. We designed it in 9 months, I think.
Now, how did the lipstick building get its name? I mean, was there an actual makeup company as the client or the tenant?
No. Carter Weissman, who wrote for the New York Magazine, dubbed it that in a review.
Because it looks like a lipstick?
Yes. Now, I was upset because I picked a beautiful stone, beautiful red and pink stone, and the client went to Italy to order all the stone, and he came back with this sample that didn't look anything like the stone I sent him to Italy with, and I sort of said, not very nicely, "What are you, colorblind?" And he said, "Well, yes." So
oh, really?
The building's a little brown and orangey for my taste. But
my question was more like, who was the building for? Who was the client?
It was a spec office building. Gerald Hines out of Texas did a lot of these buildings, and then they built them and then filled them up with clients.
Because for years and years, when I heard about the lipstick building, I always assumed it was Revlon or somebody like that.
Wouldn't have that been fun?
Yeah. Now, Ronnette, when the building premiered, when it opened, there was really quite some acclaim for not only Johnson, but also you.
I didn't get much acclaim for it. They had a policy not to give credit to anyone in the office. So
Okay.
it was sort of a sad situation. I mean, people who knew me and knew the project knew that I had an instrumental role in it, but New York Magazine actually wanted a whole article on the project, and they said no. And I was kind of sad. You know, not first woman, but a woman doing a tower in Manhattan. Natalie Dubois was sort of from SOM, was one of those women that I looked up to, and she had done quite a number of wonderful projects, but no one ever gave her much credit. And, you know, it was a chance to celebrate women in architecture, which, of course, they've been doing a lot lately, but they certainly didn't do it back in the day.
Yeah. Timing is everything.
And I actually make a big deal about giving credit to people who work in my office. I say if you've worked at least 120 hours on a project, you know, I try and give them credit if it's published. Because architecture is more of a labor of love, and it's not done by one person. It's always a team. And, you know, it's important to recognize the contributions of the whole team.
Now, after you went on your own, you did a very famous project, the flagship store for Apple in Soho.
Yes.
What year was that?
That was 2000.
Okay.
It opened in 2001.
And I read about this project that you met Steve Jobs 53 times, which has me ask, how did you keep track?
I had a whole box of reimbursable expenses from flying out to California every week. So we numbered them. That's how I knew. And he came to New York a couple of times, and my office used to be at the top of the Empire State Building. And we had a meeting in New York, and then I went back to my office, and next thing you know, I see him standing in line with his young son to go up to the top of the Empire State Building. And I said, well, I can get you up. You know, you don't have to stand in line. And he said, no. He wanted his child to have a normal experience. No favors.
That's cool.
I didn't even know he had a son. I thought he had a daughter.
He's got 3 kids. Anyway, it was great to see that he really was. He had an air about him, and everything in the movies is true, I think. But he also had a very normal side to him as well.
And this is a great store. The photos of it are terrific.
Was it their first?
So what was nice about this project, it was the first flagship store, and we did it with, there was a whole team of people on the project. There was Bolin Sywinski Jackson, who had been working on his home in California and had worked on Pixar, and they didn't, at the time, now they do, but they hadn't done retail, and I was friendly with them. We were both on the same design committee, and I had done the store that was in the location before. They weren't New York architects, so we're the architect, but we worked together as teams. It was their office in California, our office in New York, and then people who fabricated the stone, or the stone was Italy and the glass was Germany. So there was this trying to arrange conference calls between Germany, Italy, California, and New York was quite interesting.
A few time zones, yeah. So was it part of the white design concept that Apple seemed to embrace all over with its products?
Well, that was the mandate. He wanted the stores to reflect their product. Mm-hmm. And he was very interesting, which I thought, we're doing this store, and I have always been an Apple fan. I had met Wozniak when I was in college, I'd been this Apple fan, and it bothered me always when I wanted to buy equipment. You'd go into the computer stores, and there'd be one table of Macs up in the corner on the second floor somewhere, and nobody knew anything. And Jobs wanted to be able to promote his product his way. And at the time, he said Apple had 5% of the market. And I thought, well, that isn't very much. And then he reminded me that BMW only had 5% of the car market. So
right, talking your language, right?
Yeah, and he had a funny little foible, which I thought was interesting. His car, he had a Mercedes, but his car did not have a license plate on it.
Oh, Steve Jobs' car?
Steve Jobs. That was his thing. He didn't have a license plate.
But aren't there, policemen who...
Yeah, they finally gave up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting insight.
So they just pulled him over and saw it was Steve and let him go? Is that how it worked?
I'm not quite sure on the details. All I know is that his car did not have a license plate.
Now, you've done a lot of work in retail, not just for Apple. And I understand it's really one of your favorite kinds of projects and clients to work on because of the flexibility, but also the timeline you have to work on.
Yes, I love retail, and not only the timeline and the creative part that goes in there, but it's something that you can truly measure the success of. So when you do a retail store, there's metrics. You can't, if you do someone's house, well, are they getting along better? Do the children grow up to be doctors? I don't know. But when you do a store, did you increase your sales over last year? Did you meet your targets? Did you exceed them? And you have to get retail open at a certain point, because if you don't, that might be, if you miss it by a month, that might be the month that was their profit for the year. So we've always been busy during the summer because you've got to get things open before Christmas. And if you miss the Christmas rush, now they have to sit around for another year and hope that they can make it. So I like retail a lot. Plus, there's great opportunity to be creative. Before the Apple Store, years ago, we had done the Coca-Cola store. It was a store on Fifth Avenue. And it was very interesting. The executives owned the building. They just sold it, but they owned the building. And they wanted to put a store there. And we had all these meetings about how much money they were willing to lose each year selling Coca-Cola branded items. Well, we designed the store for 1,000 people and to lose $1 million a year. And I think they had 10,000 people a day during Christmas, and they never had fewer than $3 million in profit. So it was a very interesting notion, a store that sold pencils and T-shirts on Fifth Avenue, but it was quite successful.
People don't understand when they go to stores, even in New York, the massive amounts of money that are involved and how every day can mean, $1 million.
Yes, it's crazy. But what's interesting, I think Apple has the highest retail sales per square foot of any store of all time. So Jobs was onto something.
And he certainly was.
But he was intimately involved. Like I said, he surrounded himself with lots of people. Each meeting would have 10 to 20 people, and we worked with quite an interesting group of people. It was the first time structural engineer was really important in the design meeting, not just in figuring things out, but trying to get those glass stairs as minimalist as possible. Required very advanced engineering thinking. So it was a fun project. And Coca-Cola, how do you put a Coca-Cola store next to Tiffany's and Steuben and make it not look cheap? So we did everything we could to create a store that sat well in the neighborhood.
You also work for Alexander Julian, who's from North Carolina.
Yes, I loved him. He was great. He introduced the color teal to men's clothing. He was very funny because his marketing and merchandising people came to us and said, you will put this number of people, this number of shirts in a stack, this number of sweaters, you'll hang things this close together. And I was like, I don't want to shop in your shop because I don't have any hands to lift 12 different shirts up and try and find the one I want. And I made a bet with him, and I said, let me merchandise the first shop-in-shop. These are the sort of areas in a department store that are dedicated to particular designers. I said, let me merchandise it the first month. You have the sales numbers from the previous year, and if you don't have an increase in sales the way I merchandise it, which is 50% less than how they were doing it, then I'll do the next store for free. Well, they had 150% increase in sales with 50% less merchandise.
So 50% less merchandise on the floor?
Yes.
Because it wasn't all stacked up and everything.
Right. And part of it is my architect hat, but the other part is my woman hat. I don't want to go into a store. I've got a big purse on one side, maybe a kid in a stroller on the other. I can't be using both hands to lift up 12 shirts to find something. So if you make it more appealing, people will purchase more.
It also relates to people who go into retail and you see at least half of them have some kind of coffee cup in their hand. They've got a Starbucks or whatever.
Yeah, nowadays.
Right.
Yeah. And they've only got one hand to move things.
Now, by cutting the number of articles on the floor, are you lowering the selection? I mean, is it...
Yes.
Okay. Are you simplifying it then for the consumer?
You're just not overwhelming them.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of people prefer to shop in boutiques. There are maybe not as many choices, but the choices are elegantly displayed. They're appealing. You want to purchase them. But taking it in another direction, our most recent retail project, it's not really retail, it's a hair salon for John Barrett. He used to be at the top of Bergdorf, and he moved to 57th Street in a fabulous, open, lots of glass space. But it's no longer just a hair salon. There's a library of books, there's merchandise, and very nice jewelry for sale. A lot of hair salons will sell hair product. But he really took it to a different idea about a hair salon. We have a lounge area where you can just sit and read, wonderful books, a whole wall of books that you can purchase. And so that's trying to take the idea of a hair salon and making it something more.
You think it worked?
Well, it's not working right now because everything's closed down because of the virus. But before, it was wonderful. And the one thing that we did is we encouraged him to spend extra money on acoustical treatment, and it's wonderful because his old salon was very noisy, and this one is, even though it's taller space and much more open, it's much more quiet because this acoustical treatment totally dampened the noise. So now you can talk to your stylist and the whole group isn't hearing it.
Right.
So
or flip through a book or look at some
whatever.
jewelry. Yeah.
You know, that's becoming so important in segments like restaurants, where you go into a place and it's just so loud you can't talk to someone 2 feet away.
Exactly. We really enjoyed it. But the other thing with retail is that very rarely is the client giving you the project to go do. Mostly they're your partner in it. We would have these 4 or 5 hour meetings with Steve Jobs talking about design. John Barrett was... Every day we were talking to him about things and trading ideas back and forth. You're really developing the business with the owner. The Coca-Cola store was sort of interesting. In the end, I said, I can't. I had just started my business. I was like, why did you pick me? And they said, well, no New York architect is going to give Coca-Cola a look. And he said, in your proposal, you said you were going to enhance the image of Coca-Cola. And I'm thinking, I'm young, who am I to tell Coke what they want to do? And so they said we wanted to pick someone we could control. Now, that was early on in my career, and I can tell you I've never had a more hands-off client. We just did what we wanted. Nobody added anything. So they hired me because they wanted to control me, and then they never did.
I guess it was knowing they could try to control you, but they chose not to.
Yeah. So we enjoyed that project a lot as well. The one thing that you forget as an architect is that, and especially if you do interiors, that you get to meet the captains of industry. I had lunch many times with the president and chairman of the board of Coca-Cola. I met with Steve Jobs. You're intimately interacting with the heads of these companies, and it's I think, fascinating.
Well, I know that your connections to cars have connected you to a lot of different people through your practice. When we had lunch, you were telling me stories about all that.
Yeah, no, it's my clients come from my friends and my associates that I hang out with. The architects in New York City have a softball game. It's called SLAM. It stands for Softball League Après Moderne, so after the modern movement. And I've had several clients from playing softball. I play out in the Hamptons as well in this game called the Artist-Writers game. So I've had really wonderful clients that I've met.
And what position do you play on the softball team?
Well, nowadays my position is in the way, I think. But I've always loved second base.
Second base, okay.
You're in the action, but you're not as critical as the pitcher or the shortstop.
And have you designed more prize-winning T-shirts for that team?
I have designed a couple, but now that goes to the younger people.
Okay.
We have several things where I like the younger staff to get involved. One is the Christmas card. The newest intern every year designs our Christmas card, and the T-shirt design is open to everyone, whoever has the best idea.
Ronnette, before we go, tell us what's in the pipeline. What projects of yours are going to be built, hopefully, this year or next?
Well, it's sort of interesting. We're renovating the back of house, that doesn't sound very interesting, of Penn Station from 7th Avenue to 8th Avenue, which means all of the various police units, the Metro Police, the New York City Police, the Homeland Security, the K-9 unit. So that's sort of interesting to me.
And complicated.
It's very complicated. I was very upset one day when I went into the office, and my parking garage happens to be at Penn Station, and it looked like they were using my parking garage for offices, and I was like, oh no, no. Find space somewhere else. But we have quite a few projects which we're very excited about. We're working on renovating a monument to Adam Clayton Powell up on 125th Street, which is very exciting, and we're renovating a couple of armories. And we have a lot of public work lately. We just finished the first green roof fire station for the New York City Fire Department.
Wow.
And then we have, house additions and renovations, apartment renovations that are going on. But all of that stopped in this current time. And we're kind of concentrating on our public work. We're working on several Queens Library projects. We have 18 firehouse renovations going on.
Now, are you able to do that during the shutdown of everything?
Well, we received 4 letters from clients. The health and hospitals, we're working on a hospital project. We've received 4 letters telling us we're an essential business and we better not stop. So
okay.
I, of course, wrote back and said, does that mean you're still going to pay us?
Right.
We're
That's
all a
essential
little
too.
worried.
Right.
Yeah, we're all a little worried about, all the, New York State and New York City running out of money because of all this. But you've got to think about recovery. One of the agencies in New York stopped all their work, which is really not bright because contractors follow us. So if we stop our work, when the economy starts getting going again, our projects won't be shovel ready, which means contractors can't get back to work as quickly as possible. So really, architects need to be working full speed during this time so that when things start to recover, the construction industry will be part of that recovery. You don't want to delay it.
I understand, though, that New York sent letters to some of their architects telling them to stop, that they weren't essential.
That's one agency.
Okay.
The Department of Design and Construction. But we work for the New York State Office of General Services and DCAS, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. That's actually one of the projects that's dear to my heart. We're the sole architect hired to renovate all 26 New York City courthouses to become ADA accessible, fully ADA accessible.
Nice.
It's about $400 million worth of construction potential, but it's going to serve so many people and create life much easier for a lot of people.
Well, Ronnette, I hope you stay safe up there in New York, and we will have to have lunch again when I can fly up there and visit again.
Yes. And the interesting thing, I wrote a list yesterday about all the positive things that could come out of this, and one of them is this ability to allow more flexibility for workers to work from home.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we do it right, and I think so far my staff has been amazing, this will bring more opportunity for people who might have just had a child or whatever to be able to really be a part, not just okay, I'm going home and I'm working on this. We're having Zoom meetings or go to meetings and trying to keep the office culture going. And I think that's going to be very telling for the future.
Well, good luck to your softball team, Ronnette.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, do they have a nickname?
No, well, we're joint ventured with Davis Brody Bond, another architect, so we just have our firm names. I keep saying, at some point I said, I'll retire when we win, and then we won, and I didn't retire. But I'm still having fun. Anyway, good luck with what you're doing, and I hope you're back on your house tours soon.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Ronnette.
Okay, bye now.
Next up, we'll introduce you to the stately, affordable, practical Lustron with Lustron expert Virginia Faust, plus what may be the world's only song about Lustrons from our special musical guest, Leonardo. But first, it's modernist realtor Angela Roll. In a story that we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll worked her way through college, dancing like no one's watching to Mambo No. 5 and brilliantly flipping Neutra houses, sometimes simultaneously. At age 22, following a celebrity-filled party at a famous hillside modernist house in L.A. involving late-night swimming, fig-infused goat cheese, absolute lime, and a new use for graphite. Angela was recruited to architecture school. There, she spent years in sleep-deprived design studios. Now she's a modernist real estate agent with specialized design training, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to staging a martini party for 200 from 2,800 miles away. That's absolutely true. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her 919-995-0550.
One of the most interesting side stories from the mid-century modernist era is a house called the Lustron. There was a huge housing crisis after World War II, and there were a number of different schemes to provide housing for the returning troops coming back from the war. There were various mid-century modern conventional home building projects in New York and California. There was public housing, and there was a little project headed up by a guy named Carl Strandland, who asked President Truman's Reconstruction Finance Committee in the summer of 1946 for $15 million worth of emergency loans to build small houses out of metal, houses that were prefabricated and could be put together very easily. They would be shipped to sites on a truck. You take them off the truck, you put them together, and boom, you'd have a small, fairly energy-efficient house for the returning GIs and their families. This sounded great.
And it was made out of metal.
Metal.
Clank, clank.
Porcelainized enamel, which you might have seen in like 60s and 70s gas stations.
Right.
Because they had that kind of shiny surface on it.
Right.
They were also magnetic. So instead of hanging a photo or a picture up on your wall, you just put a magnet on the back and boop.
Like the fridge.
Yeah, like a fridge magnet, but your whole house was like the fridge. And you could tack things up. It was really spectacular. Joining us today is Virginia Faust, who has been an absolutely stellar volunteer for U.S. Modernists for over 10 years, winning one of our rare Architecture Service Awards. Every week, day after day after day after day, she tirelessly monitors all the modernist houses in North Carolina to maintain our statewide for sale list, the only place people can go to see what's available in North Carolina in modernist houses all in one place. She has led preservation efforts to save iconic Tar Heel houses, such as the Lowenstein House in Fayetteville, and one of her great loves is the Lustron. Hi, Virginia.
Hello, George. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
So tell us about what is it like to live inside a Lustron?
They are so unusual. You don't have to worry about them burning down. You don't have to have a termite bond. They like the uniqueness of it. The storage spaces and the use of the somewhat limited space by today's standards was very efficient and allowed for decorative as well as practical storage. So I would say most people who own or rent one are enamored is the word. I mean, they're funky, they're unusual, they're odd. It's a conversation piece.
Are they enamored by a house that's enameled? He said.
I thought you were going to catch that one. There is that possibility. You know, like the jokes about living in a refrigerator or living in a bathtub or living in a White Castle or living in a gas station. I mean, the sizes are small. The room sizes are small by today's dimensions. The ceilings are 8 foot. Some of them have garages that were furnished by Lustron. You could contract for that. So, there are a few that have the breezeway between the house and the garage. Some of them people have added on to just standard stick-built construction. Others have completely covered over the siding, the enamel, and they've put wood or all sorts of exterior finishes, usually not the roof. So for people who are trying to track these down, the wonks who like to follow peripatetic houses, because they do get taken down sometimes and reconstructed someplace else, the roof is the giveaway. You can always see on Google. Once your eye is trained to find that, you can look. So people will move into a house and then, 6 months later, they will discover that there's another one down the street that's been paneled over. And they write into the Lustron forum on Facebook, or they notify Tom, or they put it on Instagram. Oh, look what I found down the street for me. And generally it's right, because these have been known to, they do move around.
What are the characteristics of the roof?
It's made out of stainless steel, the same type of material, but it looks like, what Spanish tiles look like, the arcs?
Yeah.
The clay tiles, kind of an arch and arch and arch. Well, that's what a Lustron roof looks like, and the gutters are integrated into the roof, so the gutters are part of the roof. So it's a very distinctive patterning. You can tell when it snows. You can see it on the top.
Now, Virginia, the Tom you referred to earlier was not Tom Guild. It's Tom Fetters. Tell us about him.
He is currently regarded as the most knowledgeable person about these. The story I heard was that his daughter was doing a project on something, either Lustrons or something similar, and he was helping, but then he got sucked in. So he went around the country, and he's documented the presence and the serial numbers. Each one of these had a serial number when it came out of the factory. The first 20 or so were used for demonstration purposes to draw in the huge crowds of people who came to see these and lined up to buy them. And then the rest of them, the serial numbers continued. So you got this oval plate on your Lustron that was back in the utility room. And Tom has been, I hate to say religious, but
passionate,
very thorough in documenting the model, the location, and the serial number of the Lustron. So if it moved, some of the ones that have been deconstructed and then reconstructed, he knows where they went. Some of them we don't know that they got moved, if that makes sense. And that accounts for some of the ones that people will find down the street that we have no record of. So Tom Fetters has published a book and revisions, at least 2 revisions, but he's widely regarded as the expert on these.
Now, how did you get into this, Virginia?
I grew up in Ohio, and there were quite a few of these gas stations, hamburger stands, and everything around. And, of course, the factory was in Columbus. And my dad's an engineer. He was a human factors engineer. So just the whole engineering aspect of this, the construction, the huge factory that he repurposed from an airplane factory, just everything about it appealed to my sense of order and ingenuity and the practicality of the design. Unfortunately, they neglected a few key elements in this. The interstate highway system wasn't built, so not every road was equipped to handle 10 or 11 or 12 tons of steel on a flatbed. Zoning codes, housing codes were problematic, and some of them didn't like it that you could construct a house on a slab that was pre-poured with, you had your electrical conduit, you had your copper pipe, and then you just drove up with this truck and put this house together. 350 man-hours was what they figured after the guys had built a couple of them, which is phenomenal.
Virginia, where can people go online to find more information about Lustrons?
Obviously, our website has quite a bit and links to other things. They can go to the Ohio History Connection, which is now the repository of most of the arcana related to this. There are several Lustron Facebook groups, both Lustrons, I Enjoy Them, and Lustron Preservation. How can I do this? Where do I find new rollers? How do I fix this problem? So it's people who are avid owners and interested in preserving them and keeping track of which ones are on the market. So there's a wealth of information out there for people who are interested.
And the website she's referring to is ncmodernist.org/Lustron. That's LUSTRON. Thanks, Virginia.
You are welcome, both of you. Take care.
Well, one of our listeners sent in this song about Lustrons. And this song is incredibly specific. And we have with us today the writer and performer of this song, whose name is Leonardo. Welcome, Leonardo.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I was bowled over how the fact, as people will hear shortly, you really tell the whole Lustron history in a beautiful ballad. How did you come to do that?
I'm a songwriter, a folk singer, and at that time, going back a few years, just writing songs and looking for songs that tell a story in that folk tradition. And as it happens, I put out a little CD called Lustron, and it was really a memory of me and my buddy, and he had a Lustron home. So here's the picture. A couple teenage boys without parental supervision in a metal house all summer with rock and roll instruments.
Yeah.
We could damage ourselves, but we couldn't damage the house. So,
Yeah, the house could take a beating. It really could.
It could have, right. And like you said, it was, not only was it magnetic, it had great echo. Like in the bathroom, you could record vocals like old school because it was echoey. And as I found out, unfortunately, it was by the lake, and we would take a swim. And of course, I had an old Fender amp and a Fender guitar, and there was a little thing called grounding that somewhere was missing.
Oh,
yeah, man. So I was actually one time we were playing, and I was wet, and I touched the house to the guitar, and I made a connection to the house, quite literally.
Wow. So, yeah, you could damage yourselves. You couldn't damage the house. But you lived to tell the story.
Yeah, they should have put that in the brochures. Maybe it would have sold better.
Right. Well,
let's listen to the song. Here we go.
All right.
Lustron Home Blues by Leonardo.
Well, the boys came back from the big war. They married a girl, now they needed a home. They put a down payment on a shiny new box. 3,000 pieces, never rust, never rise. Well, they rolled them out of Columbus town. All across the country, they were thousands strong. They fit together like a hand in glove. Porcelain enamel, yellow, blue, and brown. Hey, Mr. Strandland, you were a hell of a guy. The world beat you down, but look what you left behind. Like the pyramids or that great, great wall. The Lustron homes ain't ever gonna fall. They had a government loan till it went bust. 3 short years, they never made enough. It was a revolution that didn't quite make it. Politics and greed over innovation. Well, babies were born, now some people died. Lovers fell in love, oh, the bathtub was missized. It was a sleek design, you know the future was now. It was the home America was waiting for. Now, hey, Mr. Strandland, you were a hell of a guy. The world may have beat you down, but look what you left behind. Like the pyramids or that great, great wall. Those Lustron homes ain't ever gonna fall. So when I die, don't bury me at sea, or drive me down to the cemetery. Just to unscrew a panel and stuff me in the wall. I wanna sleep forever in my Lustron home. I wanna sleep forever in my Lustron home. Sleep forever in this Lustron home.
might be some odor issues.
I was going to say, kind of morbid, but it is a ballad. It's an old folk ballad.
Yeah.
Well, Leonardo, that is such a fabulous song, and I love that there are backup singers. You have Lustron backup singers.
The Lustrons.
That's my secret.
Yeah. I love how you compare them to the Pyramids.
Yeah.
Not once, but a couple of times.
Well, go big or go home. Mr. Strandland was going big. He had.
Yes, he was.
So.
Now, it's not Star Wars exactly, but your song was in a movie, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think part of how I got to writing this song is that I went to the first and maybe only Lustron convention in Columbus, Ohio, where we all met. And I think there were some guys making a documentary or working on one. And so that kind of gave me the impetus to write the song, and I pitched it to him, and I believe it's in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Leonardo, thank you so much for joining us. If you write any other mid-century modern material, please come and sing it for us first.
Absolutely. I'm here to help the mission any way I can.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
60 Minutes has been on the air over 50 years on CBS, and for many of these shows, they closed with a segment called A Few Minutes with Andy Rooney, with his humorous and often insightful observations about everyday things. Frank Harmon won many honors as an architect, and he retired just a few years ago. He's a constant presence in architectural juries, and architects just go crazy to attend his sketching seminars all over the country. He's been a special friend to U.S. Modernists, and he reads from his new book, Native Places, with observations on life and space and nature based on the sketches he's so famous for.
When I worked on construction sites as a teenager in Greensboro, North Carolina, there were a few old men in overalls who knew things. Gene, June, and Major knew where to find catfish in Buffalo Creek, when a storm was coming, how to hitch a mule, and which plant soaked in water would cure a headache. Later, I found a similar native wisdom in barns. This barn is placed on a hill where water drains away. Its main side faces south, where the sun will warm it. Opposite is another door to let the breeze through. The farmer made a porch on the east side because the summer rains come from the west. He made the boards from trees he cut down to clear a field, and burned the shavings from the sawmill to cure his tobacco. He made the barn fit the land. Few of us can build today with the knowledge this farmer had, but I believe it's worth trying. And while it's no longer possible to have the native genius of barns, we can leave the earth as good as we found it. That's a sentiment the old-timers of my teenage years could understand.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for modernist houses, and by Nichiha.com/US Modernist. Okay, Tom, take us out.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. Recorded at Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Carrie Cesarino handles podcast guest research, and Iva Kravitz arranges the power lunches, like the one George had with Ronnette a few weeks ago. Visit USModernist.org's massive modernist archives to hear past shows, discover 7,000 mid-century houses, and access 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. Plus, you can get our free weekly newsletter with national news, events, and tours when they start up again. Contact George at george@usmodernist.org or on Instagram at Mr.Modernism. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back soon with another edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.